So this time we're going to be talking about business planning. And in order to do that, I've got the business model canvas. So you should have that in your pack as well. Now you can also Google this template, the business model canvas. What I suggest that you do is go to a print shop and get a really, really big copy of it printed out, bigger than A3, as big as you can get it. And the reason you want to do that is because this should be something that is a really playful activity for you. Once upon a time, business plans needed to be 50, 60, 70 pages long. And sure, if you're going for a big grant or if you're looking for investors, that's a great idea. But if you're just doing it as a guide or a map for your business, this is really all you need. So once you've got this really big one printed out, grab some stick-it notes and you can just stick them in the various parts. And if you're working with a committee or a big team, you can do that as a collaborative activity as well, because the pieces of a business will move, or pivot's the word of the moment, but you don't want to pivot so much that you end up dizzy and fall in a heap, because if you're entrepreneurial like I am, that can be easy to do, going chasing after shiny things and changing your mind too many times, changing the program of workshop. Nevertheless, okay, so with the business model canvas, the best place to start is on the right-hand side, which, oh, you can see the mouse. So with your customer segments. So you really need to know who it is that you're honing your business for. When you're working in the not-for-profit sector or in a social impact, or similarly in sporting clubs, you might actually have a couple of different distinct markets. So I'll start with let's say a community centre, for example, will have different types of customers. And one group will be the group that pay for what it is that they do. So it might be a funding body, or it might be the government, or it might be a donor. But the market that they actually deliver services to, their clients, will be quite different. And if you think about that in terms of a sporting group, so you might have a customer segment that are those that fund you, or your advertising clients perhaps, whereas the people who are actually using the facilities are a different type of audience. So those particular people, is it true in sporting groups that sometimes you struggle to get full teams together to do what it is that you need to do? Maybe there's not the right answers in the room. Well, I know it is where I live in the Nambucca Valley, that people can struggle to get teams together sometimes. So you really need to understand what that customer segment is as well, so that you can attract the people into the right team. So in this webinar, I'm going to give you a little bit of time for note taking too. So make sure you've got a bit of paper. If you've got your business model canvas with you, you might want to just write a few ideas into it. If you don't, if you need paper, just give me a wave. What I want you to think about is your customer segment or segments. So who has the means and the desire to engage in your business? Who is it? And there's a term which is avatar in marketing. And your avatar is that human being. It's not the green monsters or whatever it was what they were in the movie. What the avatar is who is the ideal person that's going to buy your thing, or to engage in your service, or to support your service. Who are they? What are they thinking? Now, the more you can get into this person's mind, your avatar's mind, the better you're going to be able to speak to them. Now, before you start writing things down, can anybody think of an experience that they had where you just felt like that whole experience was designed for you, with you in mind? Can anyone think of something? It can be hard to think about, can't it? Because, and do you know why it's hard to think about? Because that experience was so seamless and enjoyable that there wasn't anything to make you angry and annoyed to complain about to other people, because it's easier to remember things that annoy us rather than things that are seamless. So yes, Heather?
Someone's saying this 4-day workshop.
For what, sorry?
This 4-day workshop, someone's saying online.
All right, sorry, thank you. Thank you, person online. That's good, and that's a great compliment to 6 Degrees, so I hope you guys have heard that. So the 4-day workshop's been seamless for someone. So something that is seamless for me is I subscribe to this thing called Retreat Yourself. So every quarter I get sent a box of goodies that I've subscribed to, and I get, the kids and I get really excited about opening up the box. But they've thought about me as their target market. So they target women in their 40-odd age bracket that like organic products or natural products, that like Australian-made things. So when I open it, I know that likely as not, I'm going to like pretty much everything in there, aside of the pasted deodorant, which I'm not quite sure about. Nevertheless, they target me. It comes wrapped in tissue paper. The packaging is great. They send an email to go with it. There's things that I can read. So they've really thought about me as the avatar in the experience. Now, I know that some of you here today are with the community garden, so you might have two different target markets, and tell me if I'm wrong. I would assume that one of your target markets are people that come to do the gardening with you, and another of your target markets would be the sponsors who are going to assist you to pay to make those things happen. So when you're thinking about your avatar, and again, those of you that are online and in the room, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to have a really good think about who that person is. So just pick one of those market segments to start with, maybe your users or maybe your sponsors or whatever it is that you want to focus on. I want you to think about how old are they? What do they like doing? What are their hobbies? Where do they read? Where do they get their social media from? What do their levels of education look like? What is it that drives them? What is it that they're thinking and feeling? What might you solve for them? Now, the better you can know this person. Yes, Heather?
Someone said sponsors?
Yes, sponsors. That's great. So sponsors are your avatar that you want to think about right now. Have a think about what might they want to be seen to be aligned to? What is it that they value? What is it that they believe in? And remember, we call sponsors as this great collective thing, but sponsors are actually human beings that are going to invest in your business. And I've actually sat on panels judging funding applications. I like the funding applications that speak to me because they align with the criteria and they speak to me and I understand who they are. So have a think about your market and who it is that they are. Now, a lot of people will tell me, but we appeal to everybody. And I'd say to them quite instantly, well, that's actually not true, because not even McDonald's has a budget big enough to appeal to every human being in the entire world. And they will never appeal to every human being in the entire world. When you think about your avatar or your target market, what that means is you can focus your energies and any money that you have and how you develop your marketing strategy, your business, in line to what it is that that person's looking for. Now, quite often businesses get developed because somebody wants to do something. They might want to start a mechanic shop because they're a mechanic, or they might want to start a fish shop, or they might want to start a community garden, or they might want to set up a bike path. But you need to think about what it is that your customers want, because it's one thing to set that thing up for yourself because you want to do it, but you need customers to engage, whether they're your sponsor customers or your customers that will participate in the activity. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now. Because it is a quick session, it will literally only be a couple of minutes, but when you listen back to this webinar, you can pick up on this activity. And if you're working with an entire group, do it as an activity with the whole group. So think about just one avatar, one target market, and just write some notes about who you think they are. So I'll let you do that. Is everyone online going okay with that activity? Any questions? Good. Hi, Anita. I just saw your name pop up there. Anyone like to make a comment on who they think their customer segment is? Their avatar?
Just quickly, we had a presenter who came in from an organisation called Tap Go. What they do is they make all about teaching people how to produce great video using your mobile phone. And they discussed their avatar. they worked out it was a female between 30 and 35 years of age, and she was either learning skills for her own business or her husband's business. They actually like worked it out like through that took them a long time to do that. So whenever they were doing their promoting or advertising or talking to their audience, they really had that avatar and honed it in mind. And during the actual workshop, there were a number of people in the session that said, that is me. So they actually really did nail it. So it was really interesting.
That's good. So if you couldn't hear that online, what Ash just said is that the company Tap and Go identified their target market were women 30 to 35 working on their own business or their husband's business. So what that means once they've identified that avatar is that they're probably not going to go to the CWA to advertise their products, or they're not going to go to the RSL or to a sporting club necessarily, because they know where to go to find their customers. So that's how. Did you want to just mention yours quickly?
Yeah. Well, one of the avatar groups that's worked well for us recently is people that just want to ride for fun without the pressure of competition.
Yep.
And it's a wide market because it's everywhere from 40 years to 70 years of age, male and female.
Yep.
That's been quite successful for us. So we produce tracks that are, not such hard obstacles and everything for them. It's been quite good.
Yeah, that's great. So
to ride with others without the pressure of competition.
Yep. Is there a sweet spot within that age group, 4 to 70, that the people that are likely to attend, likely to be part of it, and likely to be able to pay for the service?
Yeah, it's mostly juniors that are
yep.
Looking for somewhere legal and safe to ride.
Yeah,
from 6 to 16, so.
Yep, that's great. So when you hone in on a target market like that, it doesn't mean that you won't attract the other entities, but it means that you can focus things to that.
And that market then builds into the competition market.
Yep. Yeah, great. Okay, so you've got a pathway for them to follow through in. Yeah, that's really smart. And Heather? Yeah.
Angie online saying high school, TAFE and uni students, music lovers, young families, those interested in community development.
Okay, that's great, Angie. And remember, the more that you can get to know about this target market, the more that you can cater to them. So the best defined target market can actually get you to the point where you can have a photograph of the person in front of your desk, and then every time you're writing or planning anything, you're actually speaking to them. Yes?
When you target market for children, from an avatar sort of perspective, do you really think about their parents and reaching the parents?
Yeah, it's a good, and there's a lot of there's a lot of studies on selling to children that are available, some of them a little less ethical than others in terms of what they've discovered, like the nag factor. People know that there's a certain amount of, there's science behind how many times it takes a child to nag before the parent actually buys the thing. But you're right, what you're looking at is creating something for the person that will use the service, who is the child. So that could be one way of defining it, but the person that pays for it is the parent. You're quite right. So you can see that there are probably two different ways of addressing it. So this is why with not-for-profits particularly, I always say that you need to look at your customer segments in a couple of different ways. So one is who's paying for it, and the other one is who's using the service, because it can be a little bit different to a traditional business in that way, in that manner. Yeah, you're right though. It needs to, grocery stores have got it nailed, haven't they? They know that the parent's paying for the candy that goes through the aisle. So it's not there anymore, which is good to see. Okay, so we did spend a little bit of extra time on that avatar and customer segments. And the reason for that is any kind of solid, sustainable business is based around what the customer wants as opposed to what we want to give them, because it could be completely wrong. Does that make sense? Our offering could be wrong. Yeah. A lot of people say, yes, Kerry, I understand that. And then they go and do what they want to do anyway and wonder why they don't have any customers. You need to deliver what the customer wants. Okay, so we'll now go across to key activities in the model. So key activities. And that's really looking at what is it that your business needs to do to operate. So what are the key activities that you need to be undertaking? And that can really help you to develop your organisational structure. Or if you're in a volunteer organisation, might help you to deliver and understand your committee, or it might help you to look at what contractors you need or what volunteers do you need. So the key activities are an important part. Now, in not-for-profits and community groups, I quite often see things like grant writing, business planning, or even finances sometimes get left out and left to kind of as an afterthought. And then all of a sudden people realise, well, actually this function has to happen within our organisation. So then somebody ends up having to do it and burnout happens, etc., which is quite common in community groups. So identifying the key activities that your organisation will need to undertake will enable you to understand what resourcing you need and who you need to help you to be doing things. Is anybody in the room or online, when you think about your entity, feel like they're doing too many roles? Yeah. So that not everyone stuck up their hand, but I saw a few knowing smiles and nods, and maybe to you online as well. It's really important. It can be hard to attract volunteers into what it is that you're doing, but nothing is more satisfying for people than being able to do things that not only they're passionate about, but they're good at. So even getting treasurers and finance people into your entity to volunteer can be difficult. Those people are actually out there. They are out there. You just need to, my friend Rosemary says, whatever it is that you don't want to do, there's somebody out there that's dying to do it. And I honestly believe that. Yes, Heather? Yeah.
Yeah, so Angie's saying I'm a one-person radio station manager, sales, production, programming, training, admin, and grant writing.
Oh, Angie. So yeah. Does anyone want to volunteer in a radio station? Because have I got the person for you? In your key activities, Angie, write down all of those things. And I want to challenge you to use whatever social media medium that is your favourite to put up some information to say, hey, look, I'm looking for volunteers in these areas, and see what comes forward. Yes, Heather.
Periodically, we do have people, particularly retired people, professional people. They don't necessarily want to be part of that organisation, but for exactly what you've said, they're willing to help that organisation move forward.
Yeah.
The actual operational day-to-day, they're not that interested in, but they're able to provide financial support, and doing the financials, grant writing, and just developing plans, because
Yeah.
it's a sense of achievement for them. So there is definitely people out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a matter of asking.
Yeah, that we can never say strongly enough how important it is to ask, because you're right, people are out there waiting to do things. In terms of facilitating it as well through my job with Regional Development Australia, we've developed an online site called My Future Workforce. So you can just Google My Future Workforce, and what you can do as a community group is you can actually advertise for free volunteer positions in there. So then you'll link with people who are looking for opportunities, and they could be just as not just as volunteers. They could be voluntary as opposed to paid employment. But Angie, go and look up the site and list the volunteering opportunities that you have there. So it's myfutureworkforce.com.au. You can go there to do that. Okay, key resources just underneath. So that's looking at what are the resources that you're going to need to operate this business. It can be easy to think that you're not really needing a lot to do it, but what I see happen in voluntary groups quite often is people will then start donating their own personal printer or their personal internet connection or their personal whatever it is. And I always encourage people to identify clearly the resources that you need, because once these things start happening, you mightn't mind at first, but eventually you can become burned out, and then all of a sudden the entity doesn't have that resource and it's available anymore. The other important reason of identifying the key resources you'll need is that when funding opportunities come up, you then know all of the things that you can list, because sometimes, like for example, the state government's volunteer grants, I'll hear voluntary organisations say, oh, we don't really need anything right now. but maybe they did need a new urn, or maybe they did need ink for printers, or keeping in mind, I don't know that that particular grant covers those things, but there is funding that can be retrofitted into things. And if you're not having the conversation with your entire committee or stakeholder group about what resources you need, you won't have identified them. As you're doing this as well, make sure this is your business plan. So write down the biggest possible list of things that you need, the things that would be great to have, the things that are your dream to have, and put them on your business plan so that then they're identified. And you never know what opportunity might come up for you to be able to acquire those. Do you have a question? No. Up the back. Oh, got to be careful. Auctions and classrooms. Just to the left on my screen, right on yours, key partners. In the grant writing workshop, which again you can access online from Monday or Tuesday in the 6 Degrees site, key partners are the entities that not only support what you do, but really want to be part of it. So they're invested in it in some way. And they're people that you've taken along on the journey with you through it. So if you're in a not-for-profit, you might identify your key partners as being a like or similar organisation, or maybe it's a complementary organisation. Like with the motorcycle club, maybe a school could be a key partner, because who knows, a school might want to do a sporting activity as part of your... Does that happen?
No, not here, but it has happened Australia-wide.
Yeah.
Where they go around schools promoting it.
Yeah. So who are your key partners? Who will support what it is that you do? And you might have an inner circle, and then the circle gets broader from there, and you engage all of those partners in different ways as your business or your organisation or your project is developing. Identifying and being very clear about who those key partners are will also let you identify any gaps that you might have. So you might find that all of the people you identify as key partners are people that are gardening in the garden, or Angie, I'm thinking about you at the moment. I think you could develop a lot of key partners in your external environment as well. And maybe they're people, I believe, Heather, you might be able to tell me, does Coffs Harbour still have volunteering Coffs Harbour? Is that still here? Yeah. So maybe that's a good key partner for you, and maybe other people online and in the room as well. So people can register with that entity as wanting volunteer experiences, and then, come to you. So key partners are important to identify, but also we'll come up over here now to customer relationships. So when you're thinking about customer relationships, it's not only about how do you keep your customers happy, but remember I said you'll have several different types of customers. So they're the service users and the ones that pay for it. And then there's the entities that support it as well. So give some thought as to how, in a uniform way, you're going to maintain relationships with all of those entities. Now, if you're systemizing it, you might decide that doing that electronically is okay. You might decide that you need to send them annual greeting cards. Did somebody just put that?
Yeah, and she just said we have a few conscious sponsors that really help.
Your sponsors would absolutely help. And how are you maintaining the relationship with those sponsors? So keep it systemized so that people are getting the same kind of benefits. Maybe even you maintaining your relationships with them by, in your case, Angie, mentioning them online. Maybe you've got signage that you can put up somewhere for them. The key point being maintaining the relationship with the customer is a really critical thing to do, because they need to remember that you're there as well. Now, when you look at channels, if we're talking about a standard business, we're talking about how do you get that product to the marketplace. So do you have a store? Do you have an online store? Of course, we know that as people do their pivoting, there's a lot more businesses online than ever before. How is it that you're reaching your customer? Now, in an entity that's also looking at funding, I want you to think about how are you reaching those funding bodies? How are you networking with them? Are you going to conferences to meet them? Are you meeting them using LinkedIn or a tool like that? So you can actually meet the bureaucrats that might work on the funding proposals on LinkedIn to make sure that they know what it is that your product is all about. in the various departments. That's possible. Facebook, if you're in a more of a community project, is a really good way to link with your community as well. So back on the channels, how is it that you're reaching your customers? How do you do that? Do you have a product that you deliver to them? If you do that, how are you doing that? What kind of mechanism are you using? It's great to think through this, not only because maybe you'll save some money in that regard, but you also want to make sure that you are reaching your customers in a way that they want to be reached. Now, Ash mentioned before that with this particular event, you were able to take some of the goodie bags directly out to some of the people that were coming. That's great. And so you delivered it around Coffs? Is that how it worked? Yeah.
That's right. From Whoopi to Sawtell and out along the way.
Yeah, that's great. So
And everyone had a digital version of outside of that. So, yeah.
that's so good. Did anybody in this room have the bag delivered to them? How did that make you feel?
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Felt very special.
Yeah. And what did you think about what did you think about council when you had that delivered? Yeah, that they're making an effort for it to be successful. Absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, do we know exactly who the avatar is for this particular business festival?
Sorry.
Who would the avatar be for this business festival? Who's the really distinct target market?
Yeah, well, small business owners, right? So we had a pretty good idea of that target, but we already have some of those relationships. So we had those, that audience. Then we use different channels via our social media.
Yep.
So we, for different types of operators, we use LinkedIn. Okay, so we had some people that more on that higher and professional types.
Yep.
And then some others that may use Facebook that was more community based and that responding in that sense. So yeah, we had some multiple channels, but we had a pretty good idea of small business owners.
Yeah. And what made you think that those small business owners might want to have the product developed, the package delivered to them in the home?
That was, we kind of didn't make a big deal of it. I don't think everyone knew it was coming either. We didn't make a big deal about that. That was really about just trying to provide more that we people thought they were getting.
Yeah.
So it was kind of just a bit of a, everyone's been glued into Zoom, and we just tried to do something a bit different and have something physical.
Yeah, I would be thinking, if I was targeting that market, business owners have been isolated. They're more prone to depression in this particular point in time. They just need a little bit of a pick-me-up. So I would think that's a beautiful way to be really thinking about the needs of the target market from that channel perspective. Yes, Heather.
Yeah, so Angie says, yes, it's fabulous. Great to see people knowing how important face-to-face gratitude and thanking is.
Yeah, well done, Coffs Council. All right, so that's a little bit about your channels. Now, I'll come back to value proposition. Cost structure is the next component. So when you're looking at your cost structure, what you're really thinking about is how much does it cost me to run this thing? Oh, that was a nice comment there. Was it Ash? That's good. Write down all the positive comments. They're important. So how much does it cost me to run this thing? Now, in a community group, you might be looking on a project-to-project basis. How much does, like you were saying before, divide things up into projects so you know how much is it going to cost to run. If you're looking at an overall entity, maybe it's how much is our admin? How much is our electricity? One of the not-for-profits I've worked with in the past didn't really have any historic cost structures. So understanding how much it cost to run that thing took some time to build the trends around it so I could actually understand, okay, this is how much it costs. Because it's never just how much does it cost to run this project. There's everything that lives underneath it, from the audit and acquittal to the management, to the telephones, to the internet, etc. So this gives you a good opportunity to understand the cost structure. Now, I'm not sure if anyone online might be in a business that is a broader not-for-profit type organisation. In this cost structure, and this almost tips over into revenue streams as well, you will have a certain set of management and administrative costs that are always very difficult to fund through grants and funding. So there's different ways that you can draw money out of your grants so that you can cover those particular costs. One of them will be rent. So if you get a grant for a particular project, you have to have somebody sitting somewhere. So you can usually charge rent as a component. You can generally charge a 10% administrative fee, sometimes a little bit more. You can generally charge for your audit and your financials as well. But you need to make sure that whole thing's covered. And if you are in a not-for-profit, one of the hardest things to fund on an ongoing basis is paying for the person. You'll also find if you're running a project, getting money for the project manager is also one of the most difficult things to find, which is why people who work in community-oriented projects are often doing it on a voluntary basis or for free. Incidentally as well, there's a term called Auspicing, and if you're not familiar with it, I want you to get familiar with it because there's 600,000 not-for-profits in Australia, and that does not include community groups. It doesn't include Section 351 committees. It doesn't include sporting groups. So whenever we're looking at cost structures, revenue, grants, and you've got to remember that potentially there are hundreds of thousands of other entities applying for the same thing, which is why you need to stand out. But those numbers are a bit scary, aren't they? Really, it's a very competitive marketplace. And the best entities have understood their cost structure very well, and people not only get paid to do the work or at least reimbursed for their expenses, but it's all covered. Revenue streams, on the other hand, how are you going to make money? Now, I'll just go into a little bit of the information that was covered in the grant writing workshop because I actually think it's important to, I'll actually bring up the slide that this is going to test me at. So the slide is here. I hope everyone can see that. So there's different ways to raise money for your community group, and it doesn't have to be about grants. Your community group, your not-for-profit, your project, whatever it is. We will go into these in a little bit more depth now than we did in the other workshops. So if you go back and see the grant writing workshop, you'll see me touch on these, but it's only quite briefly. So in terms of your business plan, how are you going to make money? You need to identify the mix of things that will enable you to do that. If you're in I won't say a normal business, if you're in a commercial business, you'll know that I'm a mechanic. I service cars or I do repairs on vehicles, whatever. I do pink slips. Or I'm a bakery, so I sell these goods, pies, whatever. In a not-for-profit or a community group, there are different ways to define what it is that you're selling. And this is where it gets really important. So are you selling the way that people are thinking and feeling about their community? Are you selling a tile or something like that in a community garden? Are you selling, what is it? What is your product or service that you're selling? And I'd actually like to give you all a few minutes on that because I think we can spend a little while on this so you can understand different ways to generate revenue into your business depending on what it is that you're selling. So can you just make a few notes online too about what are you selling or what are the ways that you can generate revenue? What is it that you're actually selling? What can somebody buy from you? If you've finished your list at this point, I want you to write down 5 extra things that you could sell. Is it? Oh. Thanks, Angie, for that comment. I'll make sure everyone knows that. All right, so I guess in light of people watching this not live, we'll keep going now. You might want to come back to this question though, because it's a really important one. Now, I'll give you this example of when I was working with an Aboriginal corporation, and I knew that we had enough funding for us to exist for 2.5 years. But part of my job in managing it was to make it sustainable in 2.5 years, which is, let's face it, almost impossible. So I set about creating a series of social enterprises. So we went from an entity that essentially sold services in connecting community, that's what it was that we were selling and getting grants for, to an entity that was selling textiles. So when I walked into the entity, I noticed that there was a women's group that had a really beautiful craft project. And I thought, maybe there's a hint in this that could actually become a business. So they did make a business of it and produce some gorgeous things. And they were featured on the front of a catalogue called Antar. So there were girls in the Northern Beaches buying formal dresses that were made by women in Barraville. And it was a really exciting time. So that was able to generate some level of revenue. So we went from selling connections and relationships to actually selling textiles. And you can see that there's a loose linkage between what was a community craft project to a professional design textile business. But it showed me that there's other ways that you can make money. So can some people give me some examples of what it is that your group sells? Yes? You sell art, yes. Yes.
We have 4 member shows a year. We have photography, live art, jewellery, sculpture. Everything.
Yep.
Cards are good, so people buy cards.
Yes, people would buy cards. Yeah, so an art gallery that sells art shows. And one of the best revenue raisers I've seen in the art industry up here is the Bunker Gallery had an exhibition from, I think it was Rotary that was putting it on, but they were offering the opportunity to buy prints for, I think it was $15 each on the way out of the cartoons, which was all fine with the artists, but they were raising money as a result of that. So they went from selling art to then selling the prints as well to something else.
Well, we sell commissions, so we take the 50% commission.
Yep.
So, yes, and quite often artists do have untrained works, which
Yep. Yep. So selling art. Anybody else?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're selling a place to ride or compete, or we do coaching there.
Yep.
But we're thinking about other ways to generate some income, and, we could hire it out to other hobby groups to use the grounds, or
Yep.
parties there. Or
Team building
training
activities.
facilities. Yeah, there's other ways we could probably generate some income.
Yeah. Now with yours as well, you're selling health. You're selling community connection. You're selling, as I mentioned before, you're actually selling employability skills. So I would challenge you to, if you have a connection with a school, to go to that school and not only say, hey, do you want the kids to come and ride? You're saying to them, we have these range of employability skills that they will learn as a result of riding, which include timing, all of that kind of stuff. And it's a much easier sell because it's what that customer cares about.
Yamaha are offering bikes to come into school and say, we'll provide motorbikes if your kids come and have a go.
Brilliant. That's good. Your market's going to explode. I can see it coming. Yeah.
We haven't quite finished the infrastructure at the community gardens, but when it is finished, we're planning on hiring the venue out to groups, whether it be or any sort of community group.
Mm-hmm.
We've already set up a store for excess produce and plants and the like, which has been fantastic just for our day-to-day costs.
Yes.
And we have workshops there as well already, but we also rent some garden beds out for
Yep.
people that might live in a apartments or whatever and don't have the space, and that's also been really beneficial from a socialising point of view. A lot of those people are relatively isolated, so they're getting to know others at the gardens and come in regularly. It's become a bit of a social thing as well.
That's lovely. So you're selling garden beds, produce, you're selling social connection. So any kind of community thing has a set of intangible things that they're selling as well as the tangible things. What I find often in community groups is they won't think about those tangible things that they can sell, and they underrate the intangible things that they're selling, because we don't want to think about that transaction as a sale, do we? It's almost sounds offensive to think about, helping someone in the community as a commodity. But in a business planning sense, if you are thinking about what do I have to sell and then thinking about what does this customer want, then it makes the conversation a lot easier because you're keeping your customer happy at the end of the day. What about value add, jams, recipe books?
Oh, it's not jams.
So
Wonderful.
jams.
Pickles and jams, yes. And, we do have recipes at times available just from some of the projects we've occasionally grown, like the rose hips.
It's also been a good way for people. We have it right at our front gate.
Yes.
And some of the plants and things are inside the front gate, so they walk in and then they start to wander through the whole complex.
And get interested in it. Yeah.
We've seen it from the road, but we haven't seen what you really do.
That's clever. So you've got your product placement worked out quite well. That's good. I hope you could hear that all online. Please ask if you needed to hear more. Yes.
And just as another area, fundraising for community groups, not-for-profits, is to get on the Richie's IGA community program.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. So Angie's mentioned Richie's community program, and also you mentioned Regional Australia Bank before, who have grant application opportunities. And even, I think if you're in a sporting group, you can put your name down at Rebel Sport or somewhere like that and get donations too. There's a lot of the entities are doing that.
The return and earn.
Return and earn, yes. Yeah.
We've got a volunteer that walks every morning and collects all the cans and then gives them to us. It might be only 10 cents a can, but we're raising $20 or $30 every couple of weeks.
Yes.
That's part of it, and I'm about to put us back up on the board as a charity.
Yeah, great.
To put your cans in and tap on what's name. So.
That's great. Well, $20, $30 a week would go a long way in your community group. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Quickly, that's really on brand with what you're doing as well.
Yes.
So even though it's not raising a lot of money, that's
It's about recycling, sustainability. And we put it out there. You collect the cans, we'll come and collect them from you.
Yeah.
And we'll, gain the funds from you. Yeah.
Great, that's good. And that also enhances your social connection, meeting more people in the community. Nice one, that's good. So the list that you can see in front of you now is, once you've identified what are the things that I can sell, and believe me, once you get your mind around that, you'll identify more and more things that you can sell, like maybe bike maintenance kits. So then you can start thinking about, so these are all essentially potential customers for your entity. So if you're fundraising, you have potential customers that will be buying raffle tickets or coming to your event or whatever it is that you have happening. Philanthropists and donors. So you'd really be surprised how many philanthropists are out there that are wanting to donate to different projects. And they don't always have to be high net worth individuals that live in the capital cities and just want to support some particular cause. There are people who have philanthropic tendencies in our region as well. In fact, I'm told that our region is a very generous body of people who like to donate to things. So how are you going to go about attracting that market? And Angie, thanks Angie. Facebook allows people to fundraise. Yep, I see that. Sponsorship. So do you have anywhere that you can put signage that you can sell that opportunity to sponsors? Maybe it's on your social media or your website. Whatever it is, where is the real estate that you can actually sell? The real estate may live online. Crowdfunding, the better your story is, the more likely you are to be able to get that funding. And I really like, sorry, I just realised that's time. You can actually get something. So you'll see, like I remember this esky that I saw once, and it had speakers in it and the USB port and everything that opened and closed. But if you were part of that crowdfunding campaign, you actually got one of those too. So you might think about it in terms of, rather than people just donating money, maybe they get something for it. You might have investors, commercial loans, or self-generated revenue. Now, I do like to keep to time, and obviously I haven't done that now, but I'll go into the last part just so we make sure we cover it. Now, there are good resources online that can also guide you through this business model canvas. Just Google the business model canvas and you'll find a lot of them. The last bit that we haven't looked at yet is a value proposition, and some people might call this your unique selling proposition. I'm not really big on unique. I don't really think there's much of a, I don't really think it's a thing anymore because, you know, we live in a global marketplace now, but you do need to have a value proposition to be able to sell your things to people. I personally believe when you really think about who your customer is, what you're doing is you're developing your business around what they value. And that will speak to them and enable you to be able to connect with them. So you could hone this into a value proposition statement. So this isn't a good statement, but it will give you an idea. The best coffee in Coffs Harbour. That might be somebody's value proposition. I don't know, it doesn't work for me, but it might work for somebody. The most relaxing way to spend a Sunday, or high adrenaline way, or whatever. Maybe the garden's the most relaxing way to spend a Sunday. Your value proposition and spending some time thinking about that is, it's really about what value do you give to your customers. So if you're thinking about your customers as in the person that's paying for the service, what kind of value will they be getting? Does it tick all of their funding boxes, or does it not? What kind of value will you be giving them? Because we're at time, there's a lot of information that you can find online about value proposition, and as I said, it's sometimes called unique selling proposition. I'd suggest that you look for that, and if you want any more links on it, please let me know. I'd be happy to send them to you. I follow an agency called the Audacious Agency. I'm actually doing a program with them myself, and they, Lauren Clement has a book called True North, and when you read that book, that really talks to you about your value proposition. So the thing I would ask you to consider in that is, what is the one word that describes what it is that you do best? And we'll actually end on that activity, because I'd like to hear everybody's one word. What is the one word that describes your project, your business, your community group best? Because that will give you a clue about what your value proposition is. Fun. Yeah. Yeah. And that fun is very significant difference to danger. Yeah.
Mine says educate.
Educate. Yeah, nice. Has anyone else got a one word?
I've just got connection.
Connection, yeah.
I've got welcome.
Yeah.
Diverse.
Yeah.
Community.
See how you're coming up with words that aren't, you're not saying art, or you're not saying garden. You're saying the way that you're making people think and feel. And that is where a really good value proposition will be starting. So that's the workshop, basically. Again, as per last time, don't hesitate to get in touch with me with any questions that you might have. And there's a lot of different posts that I put either on LinkedIn or on the page for you to help you, and always looking for content to write about. So if there's something you're needing to know, tell me so I can write about it. Thank you all.
Thanks.